Will you pray with me? Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. When they write the history of our time, when they tell what happened in our day and why, do you think it will sound like something out of the Bible? Will it sound like what we heard today? There was a time when people served the Lord. They had seen what great miracles the Lord had done for them, and their leaders led them to serve the Lord all their days. But when that generation was gone, another followed that did not know the Lord, that had not seen what the Lord had done for them. And in time, these people who did not know the Lord abandoned him and went after other, lesser gods. And centuries later, when the history of their time was written, it was told as tragedy, because the consequences of their faithlessness to their Lord led inevitably to their destruction. If our time is like the time of the judges, when a faithful generation gave way to an unfaithful one, we should not be surprised to see God giving us over to plunderers and selling us into the hands of our enemies. It is as though the Lord were saying, "Let the gods you have chosen to worship watch out for you. Let the gods you serve sustain you. Let the gods to whom you have given yourselves give you what you need." And the tragedy of their time and ours is that those who choose to follow other gods think their chosen gods can protect them and sustain them and meet their every need and desire. They are not concerned that the God they have abandoned will abandon them in return. So who are these lesser gods so many people are so eager to embrace? In Bible times, they were the gods of the Canaanite neighbors of the children of Israel. When the Israelites left the pagan people in place around them, they left their pagan gods in place as well. And the history of that time was that the Canaanites had a far easier time luring the children of Israel into the worship of their gods, like Baal and Ashtoreth, than the Israelites did in converting the Canaanites to the worship of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And why would these lesser gods be so enticing? Simply put, worshiping the gods and goddesses of the Canaanites was easier and more fun. The Canaanite gods didn't demand as much of their devotees as Israel's God did of his, in terms of covenant loyalty and moral restraint. Baal and his consort, Ashtoreth, were just supposed to ensure the fertility of crops, livestock, and people. And worshiping them consisted in showing them how to do that and celebrating when they brought the rain and new life to family, flock, and field. And generation after generation, Israelites would look it all over and decide, I think I'll give this Baal worship a go. And off they'd go, down the wide, easy way to destruction. As the old saying goes, it seemed like a good idea at the time and time again. And it was still a problem when the historians were writing about that time in history centuries later. They were writing about it to show their own generation that following old Baal and Ashtoreth was responsible for every bad thing that had happened to Israel ever since the first new generation took over after Joshua and the faithful elders had led the people into the land that God had promised them. But who wants to learn from the mistakes of the past when you're having so much fun making the same mistakes in the future and in the present. Of course, today, Baal and his girlfriend Ashtoreth don't have the allure they once did. The whole pagan idol thing has gotten a bit old. Though when people abandon the Lord, they tend to become suckers for everything, even antique stupidity. But mostly, we're making the same mistakes differently now. We live in what has become a proudly postmodern world with all the technological, economic, and psychological advancements that amaze us every day. Our world has also multiplied those things that can qualify as lesser gods in our lives. So, if you do not know the Lord, if you do not know what He has done for you, and think the smartest thing you can do is abandon the Lord who brought the children of Israel out of bondage, and you out of who knows what kind of jams you were in, who created you and everything else, and everything necessary to keep you alive and well in this world and the next, if you do not know this Lord, you might choose any one of an almost limitless line of lesser gods. You could choose money to be your God, either because you have it or because you don't. You can worship money either way, it really doesn't matter. If you happen to have a lot of money, you can make a fetish out of spending it or hoarding it. If you don't have much, you can spend all your time and thought on how wrong that fact is and how wronged you have been by whoever or whatever stands in the way of your desired affluence. Many among our younger generation have made fame their God, worshiping at the altar of the remarkable ability now available to put your picture before the public and publish your every thought or movement for all the world to read. The freedom to do whatever you desire has become, for a growing number of people, the deity before which they bow. Technology has removed the restraint of undesired consequences from many formerly forbidden activities, and at the same time expanded the opportunities to engage in them. What I want to do has replaced what I should do as the moral code and religious creed of many who serve the God of personal pleasure with fanatical devotion. And then there is the God of scientific skepticism and intellectual arrogance, an ironic faith in that it presumes to have proven all faith irrational and absurd. Yet the more its adherents seek to destroy the faith of others with their assaults of logic and cynicism, the more they take on the form of a religious cult themselves. These are but a few of the many defective deities eagerly awaiting the worship of those who decide to follow a false god. In our sin-marred world, there will always be lesser gods, appealing to the people the true God has created and called to be His own. And many will turn away from the Lord to go after them, to serve them, to bow down before them. And whether these other gods are ancient or modern, the reason for their appeal is the same. They offer the illusion of an easier way. Life is hard. Even the best of lives are fully furnished with hardship, frustration, disappointment, and sorrow. Henry David Thoreau said, "Most men live lives of quiet desperation, and women don't get off any easier." But we want life to be easier, even though we even think it ought to be easier. And when you start thinking that way, you start looking for the easier way. And when some way looks easier, the natural inclination is to turn off the hard road onto the easy one. And there's the rub. There is no easier way. Not to the place you want to go. Every way that seems easier, every way that promises to be easier, isn't. It's an illusion. It either gets much harder than the way that seemed harder to start with, or it takes off in the wrong direction and ends up in the worst place of all. And every seemingly easy way has some God or other urging you to come with him on his wide and wonderful way to destruction. Why is the way to destruction easy and the way to life hard? I don't know. I wish it were the other way around, but it isn't. The gate you want is narrow, even though you want the gate to be wide. The way you want is hard, even though you want the way to be easy. Lesser gods will not get you where you want to go. But following them will get you on God's bad side. The report on the period of the judges in Israel was that God's people did what was evil in God's sight. They provoked the Lord to anger. And God made what they thought would be the easy way with the other gods very hard indeed. How did he do that? He let his people go down the easy road with the lesser gods until it went over the cliff. God warned them and then let them do what they wanted and reap what they sowed. Look around. More and more people are heading down the easy way every day. Even those who ought to know better have drunk some lesser god's Kool-Aid and joined the temporarily joyful journey to a destination no one in his right mind would desire. Jesus said, "Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves." False prophets hawking the ways of lesser gods. Looks good, sounds good, but it's all an illusion. The devil told Jesus when he tempted Jesus in the desert, "There is an easier way to get where you want to go. Follow me, and I'll lead you to where you can rule the world without going through that crucifixion business." It was pure delusion, and Jesus saw it for what it was. Jesus says, no thanks to the devil. To us, he says, take up your cross and follow me daily. He who loses his life for my sake will find it. The way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except by me. Enter the narrow gate. The hard way is the only way that works in the end. When they write about us and our time far in the future, I suspect they will wonder why so many were deceived by the lesser gods of our day. How so many people who possess such a heritage of faith in the one true God would abandon him to bet their lives on illusions of an easier way. The generation that grew up in the shadow of Joshua and the faithful elders, the generation that enjoyed the blessings of the miracles their ancestors had personally observed, could not read the history future generations would write about them, or see the terrible consequences that would befall them in the future for choosing lesser gods. Nor can we read our history today. But God, the true God, has provided us their history so that we will know what will come of our choices in our day. They were warned about lesser gods and easier ways, just as we have been. Enter by the narrow gate. The way is hard, but it is the only true God's only way to live.